The scream tore through the night's silence, sharp as a blade slicing through weathered cloth. It echoed so violently that dogs throughout the neighborhood erupted into frenzied barking, sensing disaster unfolding. Martha next door switched on her porch light. The rusty gate of Mr. Harris's fence creaked open. The entire block stirred awake. Yet Eleanor remained seated in her rocking chair on the back porch, wrapped in the woolen shawl her mother had knitted 4 decades ago, gazing up at the stars. For the first time in 67 years of living, she smiled because someone was finally screaming because of her. What kind of mother smiles when her own son screams like that? What sort of woman sits calmly rocking while chaos erupts inside her home, the kind who's been crushed for 3 long months? The kind who's become a shadow in her own house? A woman whose money was stolen, dignity trampled, and voice silenced by her own flesh and blood. This story didn't begin tonight with that piercing scream. It began 3 months earlier on the day Eleanor buried her husband and unknowingly buried her freedom alongside him. It was a dreary Thursday morning in July when they lowered the casket into the ground. The sky hung gray and heavy, carrying the collective grief of every widow on earth. Eleanor wore a simple black dress purchased hastily from a downtown store. In 42 years of marriage, she'd never needed mourning clothes. Thomas had always been too stubborn to die until his heart decided it could take no more. Heart attack, the doctor said, quick, painless, without farewell. He'd been fixing the backyard fence that Monday morning. When Eleanor called him in for lunch, she found him lying on the grass pliers still clutched in his hand. During the funeral, people embraced her, offering familiar platitudes. He's in a better place. God has his reasons. Stay strong, Eleanor. She felt torn in two. Part of her grieved deeply for the breakfasts they'd never again share, for their silly arguments over television shows, for his faint scent still clinging to his pillow. 42 years couldn't vanish in a single moment. They had rooted themselves in each other even when those roots sometimes caused pain. But another part of her, the part she felt guilty acknowledging, felt relief. Thomas had been a good man, hard-working, never harsh or violent. But he controlled everything. Every cent in the house fell under his supervision, as if her efforts, her work, meant nothing. For decades, Eleanor had taught at the public school, retiring with a worn back and hoarse voice from years of teaching. Yet her pension went directly into his account, and he'd hand her $800 monthly for household expenses and personal needs. $800, like allowance for a child. Whenever she wanted new shoes, a dress, or drugstore lipstick, he'd frown. "Do you really need that, Eleanor? We should save." Save for what, she never knew. The house was paid off, no debts. But he clutched money like someone guarding water in a desert, fearing it would someday run dry. And when he died, she felt the hollow space he left behind, both the absence of his presence and the sudden expanse of possibility. 2 weeks after the funeral, Mrs. Lawson, the estate attorney, a refined woman with silver-rimmed glasses and expensive perfume, called Eleanor to her office. She opened a brown folder, her voice professionally detached as she explained the details. Their suburban Dallas home was valued at $680,000, debt-free and mortgage-free. Most importantly, Thomas had placed everything solely in Eleanor's name in his will, something she hadn't known. "Your husband wanted to ensure you'd be protected," Mrs. Lawson explained, adjusting her glasses. "He even added a clause stating that if your son ever attempted to claim your assets, the entire estate would go to charity instead." Eleanor froze. Thomas had never mentioned this, but reflecting now, she remembered how he always avoided giving money to their son Nathan. He never trusted him. "There's more," Mrs. Lawson continued. "His savings, life insurance, and retirement funds total $127,000. All yours." Eleanor sat speechless. $127,000, a house worth nearly $700,000, and a monthly pension exceeding $3,000. For the first time in her life, she owned her existence. She left the office on trembling legs, heart pounding not from joy, but from the unfamiliar rush of freedom. The strange, thrilling, slightly terrifying sensation of being able to decide for herself, buy what she wanted, go where she pleased, live how she chose. That afternoon, standing in her living room, Eleanor surveyed the old furniture, faded curtains, and bulky, outdated television. She contemplated redecorating, traveling, purchasing that deep blue sofa she'd spotted in the furniture store, the one costing $2,800 that had haunted her dreams for months. She smiled at the thought, but her smile quickly faded because just 2 days later the doorbell rang. When she opened the door, there stood Nathan, her only son, holding 2 large suitcases and a backpack, wearing that crooked smile he always displayed when wanting something. "Hi, Mom," he said, walking in without waiting for an invitation. "I'm staying for a few days. We need to talk." And just like that, with 2 suitcases and 1 fake smile, hell walked into her home. Nathan never appeared without reason. In the past decade, he'd visited maybe 6 times, always hurried, always with excuses. He lived in Houston, merely a few hours' drive away, but the distance between them stretched far greater, an ocean of silence and broken promises. At his father's funeral, he arrived late. The service had already begun when he walked in wearing a wrinkled shirt and jeans, as if he'd just rolled out of bed. He didn't cry. He stood in the back with arms crossed, occasionally checking his phone. Afterward, he gave Eleanor a half-hearted hug and said, "If you need anything, call me. I'll stay a few days to help." But he didn't. The next morning, he disappeared, claiming an important interview. He hadn't helped with paperwork or stayed with her through those suffocatingly lonely nights. Yet 2 weeks later, he returned with luggage in hand. "Jessica kicked me out," he explained, tossing his bags onto the couch as if he still lived there. "We had a huge fight. She told me to leave." Jessica marked the 3rd woman Eleanor had heard about, though she'd never met any of them. She only knew their names from blurry photos Nathan sent and stories he told when needing to borrow money. "What about work?" Eleanor asked, standing by the door. He shrugged, opened the refrigerator, and drank orange juice straight from the bottle. "Didn't work out. The boss promised $3,200, but the contract only stated $1,800. I'm not an idiot. I quit." Eleanor's stomach sank. She'd heard this story too many times. Nathan always had reasons for unemployment: unfair boss, insufficient pay, excessive hours, unstable company. She wanted to ask what he'd been doing for the past 5 months, why he hadn't called, but she already knew the answer. He only remembered her when needing something. "Do as you like," she said, forcing a smile. "Your room's still the same." The small back room with its single bed, creaky dresser, and band posters still stuck to the walls from his teenage years. She'd never removed them. Perhaps deep down she still hoped he'd return as the boy he once was. But the man who entered that day wasn't that boy anymore. At 38, his belly had softened, his hair, thinned dark circles, shadowed his eyes. He dropped his bags on the floor, collapsed onto the bed without removing his shoes. "I just need time to get back on track, Mom. A few days." A few days turned into a week. A week became 2. And Eleanor, as always, allowed it to happen. Initially, she welcomed having someone around. The house had felt too empty since Thomas died. She often woke midnight reaching for him before remembering his absence. That emptiness consumed her whole. Having Nathan there, the sound of late-night television, the smell of reheated food in the kitchen, made her feel less alone, even though he mostly stayed in his room or sprawled across the couch watching phone videos at volumes that made her head throb. She cooked for him, did his laundry, cleaned his messes. Each time he ate without thanking her, left dirty dishes in the sink, or complained the food was bland, she swallowed her anger and told herself, "He's going through a difficult time. Be patient." Then came the requests. "Mom, can I borrow $850, need work clothes for interviews?" She gave it. "Mom, my phone broke. Need a new one for job hunting around 1-200. She gave that too. "Mom, my scooter broke down. Repairs cost $620. Again, she complied. Each time he promised, "I'll pay you back once I get a job." But the job never materialized, and the money never returned. Mrs. Lawson had already transferred the full $127,000 into Eleanor's savings account. She printed the statement and kept it in a blue folder alongside her mother's jewelry and important documents. Each night before bed, she'd open that blue folder and examine the numbers. $127,000 represented a security she'd never known a chance to live her remaining years with dignity, proof she still mattered. But with each of Nathan's requests, that number shrank. $126,150, then $124,950, then less. He didn't even blink when asking for more. One evening, while washing dishes after dinner, Nathan entered the kitchen, sat down, and began scrolling through his phone. After a silence without looking up, he spoke. "Mom, we need to discuss your finances." Her hands froze beneath the running faucet. "My finances? Yeah. How much do you still have in savings? Around $100,000. Her heart stopped. How did he know Nathan? "That's none of your business." He laughed softly, coldly. "None of my business. I'm your son. Your only one. If you die tomorrow, where does that money go? The church, some stranger. She turned, wiping her hands on a towel. I'm not dying, Nathan. But eventually you will, Mom. You're 67 living alone. Anything could happen. His tone carried no concern, only calculation, as if measuring how much time she had left. A chill ran down Eleanor's spine. I'm fine. I don't need anyone managing my life. He shrugged, still fixated on his phone. Whatever, Mom. Just saying you should organize things. It's for your own good. Then he left the kitchen while she stood there, hands trembling, chest tight. That marked the first moment she realized she feared her own son. That night, lying in bed, she stared at the ceiling and thought of Thomas, of the clause in his will, of whether he had seen in Nathan what she refused to acknowledge. She clutched the pillow, still faintly scented with his cologne, and cried quietly, afraid Nathan might hear. She understood then that her freedom had an expiration date, and time was running out. In life, certain moments reveal you've lost control, not loudly or clearly, but quietly, like sand slipping through your fingers. The harder you try holding on, the faster it falls away. Eleanor was experiencing such a moment without even recognizing it. 1 week later, on a Saturday afternoon, Nathan opened her bedroom door without knocking. His expression appeared stern, almost paternal, as if preparing to deliver profound wisdom. He dragged the chair from her vanity and sat opposite her legs, spread hands on his knees. Mom, we need to talk seriously. Her stomach nodded. About what? He inhaled deeply. His tone weighted. About your money, this house, the future. You can't continue living like this without planning, without structure. Now that I'm here, I'll handle everything. At that moment, the abyss opened. Eleanor realized she was living with a stranger, a dangerous one. You're 67, Mom, he began slowly. Your memory isn't what it once was. That's normal. Pain struck her chest. My memory is fine, Nathan. He offered a pitying smile the kind doctors give stubborn patients. I know you think so, but haven't you noticed you've been forgetting things lately? You left the stove on the other day. Last week you left your keys in the door. Older people are easy targets, Mom. Anyone could take advantage of you. She started to respond, but he continued without pause. Now that I'm here, I can help. I'm your son. Let me help you. We'll reorganize your finances, consolidate everything under one plan. You'll feel safer, and so will I. His words sounded reasonable, even gentle, but something felt wrong, something twisting vaguely in her gut. What do you mean, reorganize? He leaned forward, elbows on knees. First, we should combine everything into one account. Your savings, pension, everything. I'll manage it all, Mom. Pay the bills, buy groceries, handle everything. You won't worry about a thing. Her heart pounded. But I can still manage Nathan. I've been doing it alone. I know, but it's tiring. You should relax and enjoy your golden years. Let me handle it. Relax and enjoy your golden years. As if she were some senile old woman who couldn't tie her own shoes. He didn't wait for an answer. The next morning, knocking awakened her. Mom, get up. We need to visit the bank. I made an appointment. Still in pajamas, Eleanor blinked at her nightstand clock. What time, Nathan? Now the branch manager's only free this morning. Get dressed. She could have refused, could have locked the door and returned to bed. But she didn't, because mothers always listen to their sons, right? They don't question. They trust. How foolish. At the bank, Nathan guided her down the hallway like a lost child in a mall. He gripped her arm, practically pushing her forward. The manager, a man about 30, wearing a navy suit and striped tie, greeted them politely. Good morning, Mrs. Eleanor. Your son explained everything. You'd like to grant him power of attorney over your account, correct? Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Nathan, who placed his hand on her shoulder. It's just for convenience, Mom. I'll handle everything, so you don't need to visit the bank anymore. The manager added, with this authorization, he can transfer funds, pay bills, withdraw money, everything on your behalf. It's very common in families, especially when parents age. Age. The word struck like a brick. She wasn't disabled or senile. She was 67, not 90. She still drove, cooked, cleaned. But in that room, everyone viewed her as helpless. I need to think about this. Nathan squeezed her shoulder hard enough to hurt. Mom, we're already here. Just sign it. The manager slid the pen across the desk, and foolishly Eleanor signed. Leaving the bank, Nathan beamed like he'd won a prize. He stopped at a nearby bakery, bought coffee and a cheese roll, handing them to her as if celebrating. Everything's arranged now, Mom. You can relax. But she couldn't relax. Her throat felt constricted, her hands cold despite August's heat. She wanted to cry but didn't know why. When they returned home, Nathan went straight to his computer. Eleanor stood in the kitchen staring out the window at Martha hanging laundry just as she had done that morning. 2 days later, he entered the kitchen while she peeled potatoes. Leaning against the refrigerator with crossed arms, he delivered the bombshell, "Mom, I spoke with the bank. Starting next month, your pension will deposit directly into my account. It'll be simpler that way." The knife slipped from her hand, clattering onto the floor. It's better, Mom. I'll pay the bills, purchase what we need, manage everything. You don't need anything except a place to rest. Rest, that word again, but now it sounded different. Like erasure, like an ending. "Nathan, that money belongs to me." He sighed impatiently. "I know, Mom, but I'll manage it now. It's for your own good." For her own good. She swallowed hard, wanting to scream, to tear up those papers, to run to the bank and undo everything. But she did nothing. She just stood gripping the sink's edge as her world collapsed because she had just surrendered her freedom to her own son. From that day forward, everything changed. Nathan controlled everything. He handled grocery shopping, always selecting the cheapest items in the smallest quantities. When she asked him to buy something, he rolled his eyes. "You don't need that, Mom. We must save." Save with her money. He changed the Wi-Fi password and refused to tell her, claiming she wasted data watching videos. He began monitoring electricity usage, complaining whenever she left the kitchen light on. "Electric bills are expensive, Mom. Be careful." She felt like a stranger in her own home. At month's end, he called her into the living room and handed her $400 bills. "Here, Mom, your allowance." She stared at the cash in his hand as if counterfeit. "Allowance? Yes, $400 for your personal needs. If you need more, let me know." $400, while her pension exceeded $3,000 and her savings topped $100,000. "Nathan, I need more than that." "For what? You don't go out, Mom. I cover everything. That's plenty." She accepted the money with trembling hands, retreated to her room, locked the door, and wept. She cried from anger, humiliation, and fear. She had become imprisoned in her own life. Lying there, staring at the ceiling, Eleanor thought about Thomas, her late husband who had controlled their finances, handed her money like a child's allowance, decided what was worth buying. For 42 years, she had dreamed of freedom, and when she finally possessed it, she handed it over to another man. The only difference was that Thomas, strict as he was, had loved her. They built a life together. But Nathan merely used her, and she allowed it. How could she be so foolish? Would he ever stop, or was this merely the beginning? There exists a difference between living and merely existing. Eleanor learned this the cruel way. Living means waking with purpose, choosing what to eat and where to go, having a voice. Existing means becoming another object in the house, occupying space, but lacking meaning. That described Eleanor now, a woman merely existing in her own home. The first weeks after Nathan seized control brought a series of small humiliations that constructed an invisible prison gradually tightening around her. He controlled everything from groceries to her daily life. He always bought the cheapest rice, sticky and mushy, beans full of pebbles she had to sort through, her back aching, the cheapest meat cuts, tough and gristly. "Just saving, Mom. You don't eat much anyway." She still had all her teeth still strong, but he spoke as if she were too old to chew. One day she asked him to buy a jar of olives. She had always loved olives, but Thomas hated them. So for 42 years she never purchased any. Now that he was gone, she thought she finally could. "Olives?" Nathan scoffed. "That's extravagant, Mom. We can't afford fancy items like that." "Can't afford it?" Her voice sharpened unusually. "Nathan, I have over $100,000 in my account." He looked at her with the same irritated expression adults use with children. "You used to, Mom. Now I'm using it wisely for our future." Our future. As if his future were being constructed with her money. She never got the olives. After that, she stopped asking for anything at all. Her friends stopped visiting. Sophia, her closest friend for over 30 years, still called weekly, inviting her for lunch, coffee, or conversation. But whenever Eleanor agreed, Nathan invented an excuse. "Mom, it's too hot outside right now. Your blood pressure could spike. Rest. Maybe next time." Until one day he answered the phone himself and said in that soft, caring voice, "Hi, Sophia. My mother isn't feeling well lately. She's been very tired. When she improves, I'll let you know." Then he hung up. Eleanor sat less than 10 feet away. She wasn't tired. She wasn't ill. She felt perfectly fine. But he decided she was sick, and Sophia believed him because sons don't lie about their mother's health. Right after that, Sophia stopped calling, and Eleanor sank deeper into loneliness. Whenever someone knocked, neighbor Martha, the mail carrier, anyone, Nathan always answered. He'd open the door just enough to block the entrance with his body, quickly saying, "My mother's resting. She can't have visitors right now," as if she were disabled, too frail to say hello. Eleanor watched from her bedroom window, observed everything, felt anger slowly building, but could do nothing. She couldn't yell, couldn't force the door open and shout, "I'm here, I'm alive," because part of her had already broken, and she didn't know how to repair it. His control extended beyond money and phone calls. He began dictating what she could wear. One morning she put on a floral dress purchased long ago but never worn. It felt light and lovely, and for the first time in months, she felt like a woman again. She looked in the mirror and smiled. When she descended the stairs, Nathan looked her up and down, smirking. "Where are you going, Mom?" "Nowhere. I just wanted to wear it." He shook his head, scrolling through his phone. "Floral dresses at your age look ridiculous. You should dress more modestly, more appropriately." Her face burned with shame. She returned upstairs, changed into an old blouse, and looked into the mirror again. But she didn't recognize the woman staring back. Pale, faded, invisible. Exactly what Nathan wanted her to become. The worst revelation came when she discovered what he had done with her money. One afternoon, Nathan went out to run errands, leaving his computer open on the table. Eleanor was mopping the floor when the screen illuminated. Normally she never snooped, but something drew her closer. On screen was a WhatsApp web chat with a building supply seller confirming an order: luxury hardwood flooring, premium wall paint, imported faucets. Total $12,400. Delivery address 428 Rose Street, apartment 301. Her heart froze. She recognized that address, a new building in one of the city's most expensive neighborhoods. Nathan had once mentioned investing in an apartment there, investing with her money. She opened his browser history. With each discovery, her chest tightened. Custom furniture invoices, a $900 refrigerator receipt, an $18,000 transfer to an electronics store, and another $23,600 to a construction company. Her hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the mouse. Over $50,000, $50,000 gone from her savings to furnish an apartment he'd never dared mention. She collapsed onto the sofa legs, weak heart racing, head spinning. She nearly vomited. He wasn't managing her finances. He was robbing her. And worst of all, she had enabled him. She had signed the papers. She had handed the thief her keys. When Nathan returned hours later, Eleanor still sat there. He tossed his keys on the table, opened the refrigerator. "Mom, is there anything to eat?" She couldn't answer, her throat constricted. He grabbed a container of leftovers, microwaved it, ate while scrolling his phone, left the dirty plate on the counter, and retreated to his room. She remained staring at nothing. That night, lying in bed, Eleanor contemplated surrender. Letting Nathan take everything, do whatever he wanted. Perhaps it would be easier to close her eyes, accept fate, and wait until her body surrendered. What could she possibly do? Fight him, a 38-year-old man, strong, clever, sharper than her. What would she tell police? That she'd signed power of attorney and now regretted it. They would laugh. She thought she had no escape. But sometimes when you hit rock bottom, you face only two choices: sink completely or push yourself back up. And Eleanor's moment was approaching. Sometimes the most dangerous creatures aren't those that roar and show their teeth, but those that wait silently in the darkness, gathering strength for the perfect moment to strike. Have you ever felt yourself disappearing? Not all at once, but little by little each day, another piece of you fading away. First your voice, then your joy, then your will to rise from bed. Until one morning you look in the mirror and don't recognize who's staring back. Eleanor was disappearing, and no one noticed, or worse, no one cared. Nearly 2 months had passed since Nathan seized control of her life. 2 months of surviving on a $400 allowance, eating cheap food, wearing old clothes, imprisoned within her own house like a criminal. She'd lost over 15 pounds. Her clothes hung loose. Her hip bones protruded. Her eyes had sunken into dark circled hollows that never brightened. Each night she lay awake, studying the ceiling patterns, wondering how she'd allowed this situation, calculating how much money remained, questioning if she would ever summon the courage to fight back. But whenever she imagined confronting Nathan, her body froze as if her spine had been extracted, leaving only a fragile shell, until that Wednesday morning at the supermarket. Nathan was out handling business, which Eleanor now knew meant spending more of her money on his secret apartment. Before leaving, he'd handed her a note and a $20 bill. "Mom, buy laundry detergent and sponges. If there's anything left, get some bread." $20 for detergent, sponges, and bread. Eleanor accepted silently, waited for the door to close, then donned her worn coat, grabbed her tote bag, and ventured out. The bus stop wasn't nearby, so she walked 13 blocks under the September sun, sweat soaking her back. Yet the simple act of leaving the house made her feel lighter than she had in months. At the store, she selected the cheapest detergent, $8.90 sponges for $1.50, leaving less than $10 for half a pound of bread. She stood in the checkout line when someone called her name. Eleanor. She turned slowly. Sophia, her closest friend from the public school where they'd taught together. At 64, 3 years younger than Eleanor, she appeared 20 years younger. Blonde hair, neatly trimmed, wearing a soft blouse and new jeans. She pushed a cart filled with groceries, fresh fruit, yogurt, cheese, wine, while Eleanor held only detergent and sponges. Sophia's eyes swept Eleanor from head to toe, her expression transforming. "My God, Eleanor, you've lost so much weight." Eleanor attempted a smile. "I'm on a diet." A lie. She wasn't dieting. She was starving. Starving for food, for freedom, for life. Sophia frowned, lowering her voice. "A diet? You look gaunt. And these clothes, you never went out looking like this. What's happening?" Eleanor's eyes burned. She bit her lip, fighting tears. She couldn't break down in a grocery store. "I'm fine, Sophia. Just going through a rough patch." Sophia didn't believe her. She gripped Eleanor's hand. "We're talking right now." She paid for her groceries, covered Eleanor's bread too, and pulled her to the cafe across the street. She ordered 2 lattes and a slice of carrot cake, pushing the plate toward Eleanor. "Eat." "I'm not hungry." "Eat, Eleanor, before I have to feed you myself." Eleanor lifted the fork and took a small bite. Sweet, soft, fragrant. She nearly wept at the taste, a sensation she hadn't experienced in months. Sophia crossed her arms, her tone firm. "Now talk, and don't give me diet nonsense. What's happening?" Eleanor wanted to deflect to lie, but Sophia's penetrating gaze broke through her defenses. She shattered. She revealed everything. The power of attorney, financial control, $400 allowance, cheap food, severed friendships, secret apartment, $50,000 gone. By the time she finished, tears streamed down her face, soaking the napkin she clutched. Sophia remained silent momentarily, then stated, "You're housing a parasite, Eleanor." "No, he's my son." "No, he's a parasite. And worse, you're letting him feed on you." Eleanor looked up, eyes swollen and red. "I'm not letting him. I just don't know what to do." Sophia leaned closer, voice calm but resolute. "You do know. You're just afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid he'll leave. So you let him hurt you as long as he stays close. But that's not love, Eleanor. That's abuse." Eleanor broke down again because Sophia was right. She was terrified of solitude. She feared that fighting back meant losing her only child forever. But she wondered, was he still her son, or just a stranger wearing his face, destroying her from within? Sophia cupped Eleanor's face, forcing eye contact. "Listen to me. You don't have to endure abuse just because he's your son. A child who doesn't respect his mother doesn't deserve one. Now you must fight back." "But how I signed everything over, gave him everything." "Power of attorney can be revoked. We're seeing a lawyer today." A chill ran through Eleanor, a mixture of fear and hope. What if he finds out? What if he loses his temper? No what ifs, Eleanor. Do you plan to die slowly in that house? Fade away until nothing remains but ashes? No, she didn't want that. And for the first time in months, Eleanor felt something ignite inside. Not despair, but anger. Small but alive, growing. "You know a lawyer?" Sophia continued. "Richard Hayes. He's excellent. His office is downtown. I'm calling him now." She dialed and secured an appointment 1 hour later. Richard's office was small but tidy, faintly scented with fresh coffee. He appeared about 50, with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses hanging from a cord around his neck. His handshake felt firm, his smile kind. Sophia explained everything while Eleanor provided the documents she'd managed to hide, copies of the authorization bank statements and notes she'd secretly kept of Nathan's expenditures. Richard studied each page carefully, then removed his glasses and looked directly at her. You're a victim of financial exploitation and abuse. This constitutes a criminal offense. Eleanor's heart raced. A crime? Yes. He's been using your money for his personal benefit without consent. Power of attorney doesn't equal permission to steal. But he's my son. So what? His tone remained firm without harshness. No one has the right to steal from their mother. No one. For the first time, Eleanor felt someone standing with her confirmation she wasn't crazy, wasn't exaggerating. What should I do now? Step 1, revoke the authorization. Step 2, file a formal complaint. Step 3, block all account access. Step 4, reclaim what's yours. Eleanor turned to Sophia, who squeezed her hand reassuringly. Everything will be all right. And for the first time in so long, Eleanor genuinely believed it. The fox inside her had finally awakened, ready to bite back. Eleanor's mother always said, "Dogs that bark don't bite." She was right. The dangerous ones remain quiet. They wait. Eleanor had been silently screaming for months, trapped in an invisible cage. But now she grew quiet, a dangerous kind of quiet, because the fox had awakened, and foxes never warn before they strike. She left Richard's office with 3 things a plan, a formal complaint in progress, and something she thought lost forever: determination. Sophia drove Eleanor home, talking continuously. Be smart. Move quickly, but maintain secrecy. Don't let him suspect anything. Pretend nothing's changed. Be the sweet old lady he thinks you are. Eleanor nodded, gazing out the window at familiar streets. Old houses, the park where she'd played as a child. Everything appeared unchanged except her. When the car stopped before her house, Sophia grasped her hand before she could exit. Eleanor, are you certain? Because if you start this and abandon it halfway, he'll crush you. She looked directly into Sophia's eyes and answered firmly, her voice steadier than it had been in years. I'm certain. Nathan sat on the couch when Eleanor entered, balancing a plate of expensive lasagna on his lap, the kind he purchased exclusively for himself while she ate plain rice with eggs. He didn't even acknowledge her eyes glued to the television. Took long enough, Mom. Did you get what I asked for? Yes. She lied, having left the detergent and sponges at Sophia's house. They're in the kitchen. He muttered something unintelligible and returned to his program. Eleanor went upstairs, quietly closed her door, and took several deep breaths to steady herself. Her heart pounded so forcefully she could hear it in her temples. She sat on the bed, removed the instruction sheet Attorney Richard had provided, read it 3 times until memorizing every step, then tore it into pieces and flushed them down the toilet. No one could discover this. The first step required revoking the power of attorney, which meant visiting the bank while Nathan was absent. The following morning he left early, claiming he had matters to handle, and wouldn't return until afternoon. Eleanor waited extra minutes for certainty, then put on her neatest clothes, applied a touch of lipstick, brushed her hair, and surveyed herself in the mirror. For the first time in months, she recognized a real woman, not a silent shadow. The bank bustled with customers. Eleanor took a number and waited nearly 45 minutes before being called. The manager was the same young man in the navy suit who had witnessed her signing that fateful paper. He smiled politely. Good morning, Mrs. Eleanor. How may I assist you today? I want to revoke the power of attorney I signed for my son. His smile faded. Are you certain? I'm certain. He typed briefly, frowned, and said, Mrs. Eleanor, your account has experienced multiple unusual transactions over the past 2 months, totaling over $54,000. She already knew, but hearing it spoken aloud made her chest constrict. That's precisely why I want it revoked. He provided a form, requested 3 signatures, and directed her to have them notarized next door. When she returned, he said, Your son no longer has access, but I strongly recommend changing all passwords. She did so immediately, card PIN, online login, everything. When Eleanor left the bank, her legs trembled, but her chest felt lighter. Step 1 complete. Step 2 involved moving the remaining money to another bank where Nathan couldn't trace it. Sophia accompanied Eleanor to a branch across town. She opened a new account solely in her name with no authorized users and transferred all remaining savings, $38,000. Out of $127,000, he had burned through nearly $90,000 in less than 3 months. But what remained belonged to her, and no one would touch it again. Step 3. Gathering evidence. Whenever Nathan went out, Eleanor quietly searched the house like a detective. In his room, she discovered a folder filled with contracts, invoices, and estimates all connected to the Rose Street apartment. She photographed every page with her phone. She couldn't take the originals he would notice, but photos would suffice. She learned he had made a down payment of $65,000 withdrawn from her account just before she canceled the authorization. The remainder was financed 12 monthly payments of $2,890 each, and of course those payments would come from her pension. He had orchestrated everything perfectly: keep her alive, control her distribute allowance money while using her savings to build his future, while she, the foolish mother, survived on crumbs until her dying day. Each night, Eleanor lay in bed studying the photos on her phone, feeling cold rage crawl down her spine. Not wild anger anymore, but something sharper, calmer, calculated. Nathan had underestimated her. He thought her stupid, weak, harmless. But his arrogance would become her weapon. Step 4, the most dangerous: filing the report. Attorney Richard accompanied Eleanor to the police station. She brought every piece of evidence: bank statements, photos, transfer records. The investigator, a man around 50, reviewed them carefully, then said, "You have a solid case. This qualifies as financial theft. Should I open an investigation? How long will it take? Difficult to say, but with evidence like this, not long." Eleanor signed her name and accepted the receipt with trembling hands. No turning back now. The battle had commenced, and she would prevail. In the days that followed, Eleanor pretended nothing had changed. She still cooked for him, laundered his clothes, accepted her allowance, smiled when he said, "Love you, Mom," and lowered her head when he criticized the food. But inside, she counted down, planning each move, awaiting the perfect moment. Sophia called daily. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. Just a little longer." Then, on a Monday evening, after 2 weeks of playing the obedient mother, Eleanor struck. She waited for Nathan to leave for a meeting with friends, probably to spend more of her money, and entered the kitchen. She emptied the refrigerator completely: beer, frozen dinners, juice, deli meat, everything into the trash. Then she wrote a note. "From now on, whoever doesn't earn money doesn't eat. Welcome to the real world. The homeowner." She placed the note inside the empty refrigerator, closed the door, then settled into her rocking chair on the porch, wrapped in her mother's knitted shawl, and waited. She didn't wait long. Nathan's scream sliced through the night, sharp enough to set neighborhood dogs barking in unison. Eleanor continued rocking slowly, gazing at the star-filled sky. For the first time in 3 months, she smiled. His footsteps thundered across the floor. The door slammed open. Nathan stood before her, face flushed, veins, bulging eyes wide with fury. "What the hell have you done?" He pointed toward the house, shaking with rage. "The refrigerator is empty. Where's the food?" "I threw it out," Eleanor replied evenly. He stepped forward, fists clenched. "Are you insane? How dare you throw away my food?" "Your food. That's strange, because as I recall, the person who paid for it was me with money you stole from me." He stumbled back half a step as if she'd slapped him. "Stole? I didn't steal anything. I was managing it." "Managing?" She released a dry laugh. "You burned nearly $90,000 in 3 months, bought an apartment, furnished it lavishly while I subsisted on eggs and cold rice, surviving on $400 monthly of my own money. That's not management. That's theft." His mouth opened and closed, searching for excuses. I was going to tell you about the apartment when, after you'd spent it all, or after I died so you could inherit the rest." Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Mom, I did this for our future. We could rent the apartment, generate extra income." "Our future." Her voice rose. "You imprisoned me in this house, severed me from my friends, handed me allowance money like a beggar, purchased the cheapest groceries, treated me like garbage, and you dare speak of a future." He attempted to speak again, but she interrupted. She bent down, retrieved the folder beside her chair, and thrust it toward him. "You know what I found? You spent $12,400 on flooring, $900 on a refrigerator, $8,200 on furniture, $17,500 on a motorcycle hidden in the garage. Shall I continue?" His face paled to an ashen gray. "Mom, how did you obtain that?" "From your room. I photographed everything, every receipt, every transfer, every cent you took." He stepped backward, nearly stumbling. You searched my room, my house, my money." She dropped the folder at his feet, scattering papers around him. "Now you'll return it." He stared at the papers, then at her. For the first time, Eleanor witnessed fear in his eyes. Return it, Mom. I don't have the money anymore. It's gone. Then sell the apartment. I can't. It's in my name. I signed a bank loan. That's your problem. He clutched his head, panicking. You've lost your mind. You can't do this to me. Can't I? Eleanor crossed her arms, looking directly at him. Nathan, I already have. She revealed she had revoked the authorization, changed every password, moved the remaining money to another account, and filed a theft report. The room grew silent. Nathan stared at her, as if she were someone else, as if he couldn't believe the woman standing before him was the same one he'd crushed for months. You reported me, he stammered. Yes, because I'm your mother and you forgot who you were. Her voice remained steady. You stole from me, humiliated me, isolated me, made me feel worthless, and now you demand loyalty. Loyalty is earned. Nathan and you forfeited it long ago. He began crying or pretending to. Eleanor no longer cared. Mom, please. I know I made mistakes. Give me a chance to fix this. I'll repay you gradually. I'll find employment. Enough, she interrupted, her tone calm but icy. Enough lies. Enough empty promises. Enough using me. She withdrew a folded paper from her purse and handed it to him. You have 48 hours to leave this house. If not, police will remove you. His hands shook, nearly tearing the eviction notice. You're evicting me? Yes, but I have nowhere to go. That's no longer my concern. He dropped to his knees before her, clasping his hands. Mom, please. I'm your son. Don't do this. Eleanor looked down at the 38-year-old man, crying, begging, as if she remained the soft-hearted mother he could manipulate with guilt. But this time she felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no hatred. Just cold emptiness where love once resided. You were right about one thing, she said quietly. I once thought I needed only a small corner to die in, but now I realize I'm not ready to die. And when I do, it will be on my terms, in my home with my dignity intact. You won't be here to witness it. She turned and walked inside. She locked the door, went upstairs, locked it again. That night, for the first time in months, Eleanor slept peacefully. No nightmares, no tossing, no fear. The next morning, when she descended the stairs, Nathan still sat on the couch, eyes red-rimmed, face drawn. When he opened his mouth, she raised her hand. I don't want to hear another word from you. She entered the kitchen, made coffee, and ate buttered bread alone in silence. He remained there, hollow-eyed. The following day, when Eleanor returned from the market, Nathan's suitcases stood neatly stacked in the living room. He departed without saying goodbye, without apologizing, without leaving a note. Eleanor's first emotion was relief, but the story wasn't over. There remained one final secret to uncover. 3 days after Nathan left, Eleanor received a call from her late husband's attorney, Mrs. Lawson. Mrs. Eleanor, I need you to come to my office. There's a document I was instructed to hold per your husband's request. Eleanor's chest tightened. What kind of document? A letter. He told me to give it to you only if Nathan ever attempted to take your property. She froze momentarily. How did you find out? Attorney Richard called me. We're colleagues. He informed me about your case. Eleanor's hands shook as she hung up. Sophia was with her. She had practically moved in lately to help Eleanor rebuild her life. Eleanor told her about the letter. Yes, a letter. I don't know what it says, but we'll soon discover. At the office, Mrs. Lawson greeted them with her usual stern expression, but something softer now resided in her eyes, sympathy. She withdrew an old envelope sealed with red wax, the handwriting on it messy but familiar. To Eleanor, open only if Nathan becomes the man I always feared he might. Eleanor's stomach twisted. Mrs. Lawson handed her the envelope. He gave this to me 2 years before his passing. He said he worried your son might someday take advantage of you and instructed me to deliver it only if that occurred. I presume that time has arrived. Eleanor held the envelope, feeling its weight, not just paper, but truth. A farewell. She carefully broke the seal. Inside were 3 handwritten pages, the letters shaky and uneven. Thomas must have written them when already ill, when he knew his time grew short. Eleanor, if you're reading this, my fear has materialized. Nathan has attempted to take what belongs to you, and I'm no longer present to protect you. But there's something I never found the courage to say while alive, not because I didn't want to, but because I was ashamed. Ashamed of the son we raised. Nathan was different even as a child. Not evil initially, just cold. When other children cried, he laughed. When someone got hurt, he showed no concern. Remember the neighbor's dog hit by a car? He just said it's only an animal. You told me he was merely a thoughtless child, but I knew better. As Nathan grew older, things worsened. Lying came as naturally to him as breathing. He often stole money from my wallet, and I always thought I'd misplaced it somewhere. He excelled at pretending, at manipulating, using everyone around him to get what he wanted. I tried being strict, tried teaching right from wrong, but he didn't change. He only learned to hide it better. 3 years ago, he approached me saying he needed to borrow $15,000 to repay an urgent debt or face lawsuit. I gave him the money but harbored doubts, so I hired someone to investigate. The result there was no debt. He used the money to purchase an expensive motorcycle to resell for profit. He lied to his own father without blinking. That's when I realized our son wasn't a good man and never would be. I didn't tell you because I knew you wouldn't believe me. You always defended him, said I was too severe. Perhaps I was strict, but strictness doesn't create monsters. Monsters are born that way. That's why I wrote the will as I did. The house is solely in your name, indivisible, and upon your passing it goes directly to charity, never through anyone else's hands, because I knew if given the opportunity, he would take everything from you. And if you're reading this, I was right. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I'm sorry for leaving you to face this alone. But never blame yourself. You are the finest mother any child could dream of. This isn't your fault, it's his. Be strong. Be free. You've always been stronger than you believe. Love always, even if I never expressed it well, Thomas. By the time Eleanor reached the final line, tears streamed down her face, not from sadness, but from release. She forgave not Nathan, but herself. For months she had tormented herself, thinking if she had been different, her son would have been different too. But Thomas was right. The problem was never her. Sophia finished reading, then took Eleanor's hand firmly. Your husband loved you, Eleanor, in his own way. It was genuine. Eleanor wiped her tears and nodded gently. I know. Mrs. Lawson handed her a tissue and said, One more thing. Your husband left instructions that if you ever needed legal support against Nathan, I would represent you without charge. He prepaid all legal fees for 5 years. Eleanor froze. He did that 2 years before his death. Yes, Lawson said softly. He knew, and he did everything possible to protect you. That night, Eleanor sat in her rocking chair, holding the letter to her chest, gazing at the star-filled sky as soft moonlight bathed the porch. She whispered as if Thomas could hear, Thank you. Thank you for still protecting me even from beyond. For the first time since his death, she didn't feel alone. 2 weeks later, Nathan texted, Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I need help. I have nowhere to stay. Can you lend me a few thousand? Eleanor stared at the message for a long time. She considered replying, sending money. Then she remembered the letter, everything that had happened, the woman she had become. She replied with a single word, no. Then she blocked his number. The war was over. She had won. And the best part was that once you reclaim control of your life, good things begin to unfold naturally, like flowers turning toward the sun after a long winter. Some say the most powerful words in any language aren't I love you, but enough. And Eleanor had finally learned to say it not just to Nathan, but to herself. Enough suffering. Enough invisibility. Enough allowing others to determine her worth. As she sat on that porch, watching the twilight deepen into night, she realized something profound. Our greatest power often isn't in what we build, but in what we refuse to surrender. Every stolen cent could eventually be replaced, but the years of dignity lost, those were irreplaceable. She had stopped the bleeding just in time. The house felt emptier without Nathan, but also cleaner somehow, as if a lingering illness had finally been purged. The silence no longer oppressed her. It embraced her. In that quietude, she could finally hear her own thoughts again, her own heartbeat. She began making lists, places she wanted to visit, things she wanted to learn, changes to make to the house. Small freedoms, but they were hers. Sophia stayed for dinner that evening, bringing wine and laughter back into the dining room that had become a temple of tense silence. They talked about the future, about possibilities. What will you do now? Sophia asked, refilling their glasses. Eleanor considered the question. For so long, her only goal had been survival, getting through each day without drowning. Now suddenly the horizon stretched before her, vast with possibility. It felt terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. I think, Eleanor said slowly, tasting the words, I'd like to start living again. Sophia reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Then let's begin tomorrow. And they did. Small steps at first, repainting the kitchen, the soft yellow Eleanor had always wanted, but Thomas thought too bright. Replacing the heavy drapes with light curtains that allowed sunshine to pour in. Eleanor bought that blue sofa she'd dreamed about for years, running her hands over the fabric like it was a miracle. Because in many ways it was a symbol of choice, of self-determination, of saying this is what I want and I deserve to have it. But the house still felt too large for one person. Have you considered getting a roommate? Sophia suggested. Not to replace Nathan, God forbid, but someone who brings something positive to your life. The idea terrified Eleanor initially. After everything with Nathan, the thought of sharing her space again, of trusting another person, made her chest tighten. But as days passed, the empty rooms seemed to echo with potential rather than loss. Perhaps Sophia was right. Perhaps what the house needed wasn't just new furniture, but new energy, someone who would appreciate what Eleanor had to offer. She sat with the idea, letting it take shape in her mind. Not just any roommate, but someone specific, someone young, perhaps someone striving, someone who needed not just a room, but a chance. The kind of person who would value what Eleanor had fought so hard to reclaim. 2 weeks after making her decision, Eleanor placed an advertisement in the university paper, room for rent in quiet home, mature student preferred, references required. She received 17 responses the first day. After careful consideration, she selected 3 candidates to interview. The first 2 were polite enough but didn't quite connect. But the third, Lily walked in carrying a small notebook and a nervous smile that instantly warmed the room. I'm studying nursing, she explained, her fingers fidgeting with the notebook's edge. My family in Ohio can't help much with expenses, and dormitory costs are, well, they're impossible on my budget. As Eleanor looked at her, she saw someone struggling not to take from others, but to stand independently. She saw determination in the young woman's eyes, and something else, a kindness that couldn't be faked. The rent is $650 monthly, Eleanor told her. We'll share the kitchen and bathroom. I do the cooking, you help with cleaning. Is that acceptable? Yes, Lily whispered, nearly crying with relief. That would be, yes, thank you. And just like that, a new chapter began. Sometimes the most significant changes don't announce themselves with fanfare. They slip in quietly through side doors in the form of a nervous nursing student with a notebook and grateful eyes. Sometimes salvation doesn't look like dramatic rescue, but like a simple exchange. A room offered a helping hand, accepted 2 lives intersecting at exactly the right moment. The following days brought a flurry of activity as Eleanor cleared Nathan's old room. She removed the band posters, the remnants of a childhood that had never properly bloomed into adulthood. She washed the walls, painted them a gentle green, Lily's favorite color. She bought new bedding, a small desk from the thrift store, a reading lamp. When Lily moved in that weekend, bringing only 2 suitcases and a box of textbooks, Eleanor felt something she hadn't expected, a sense of purpose returning. Not the desperate purpose of survival that had fueled her fight against Nathan, but something calmer, steadier. The purpose of creating space for another person to thrive. Perhaps that's what true freedom looks like in the end, not just the absence of chains, but the presence of meaningful choice. Not just escaping the cage, but building something worthy in the open air beyond it. As Eleanor helped Lily arrange her few belongings in the freshly painted room, she realized she was no longer just surviving, she was beginning to live again. And that perhaps was the greatest victory of all. The future stretched before her, not as an expanse of empty days to endure, but as a canvas awaiting her touch. She had no illusions that everything would be perfect from that moment forward. Life rarely offers such neat resolutions. There would still be difficult days, moments of doubt, perhaps even regret. Nathan remained her son after all, despite everything. Blood ties don't dissolve easily, even when poisoned. But for the first time in decades, Eleanor felt truly, completely herself. Not somebody's wife, not somebody's mother, not somebody's victim. Just Eleanor, a woman who had faced the abyss and found to her amazement that she was stronger than the forces pulling her down. A woman who had looked fear in the face and said finally, unequivocally enough. 6 months had passed. Some mornings Eleanor still woke amazed that this was her life, freehold, truly living. Today was one of those mornings. She awakened early, coffee aroma drifting from the kitchen below. She hadn't brewed it. That was Lily, the nursing student who rented the back bedroom, the one that once belonged to Nathan. 23, with curly hair tied back, a bright smile, and energy that made the entire house feel alive again. She studied mornings, worked at the hospital afternoons, and evenings they sat together on the porch, discussing everything and nothing. Initially, Eleanor had hesitated about having someone else in her home. After everything with Nathan, she feared sharing space again, feared being used, feared misplacing trust. But Sophia had insisted, "You need company, Eleanor, but from someone genuine, not someone who clings to you. Post a room for rent and select someone who makes you comfortable." She had. Lily was the first to respond. She arrived one Sunday afternoon, shy, clutching a small notebook and wearing a nervous smile. She explained she struggled paying for school, that her family couldn't help much. When Eleanor looked at her, she saw someone fighting not to take from others, but to establish independence. Eleanor nodded. "You can stay. Rent is $650 monthly. We'll share kitchen and bathroom. I cook, you help clean." Lily nearly wept with relief. From that day forward, Eleanor's house breathed again. When she entered the kitchen this morning, Lily had already set the table for 2 scrambled eggs, crisp toast, fresh fruit, hot coffee with milk. "Good morning, Mrs. Eleanor. I'm off today, so I made breakfast for both of us." Eleanor sat eating slowly, savoring food made with kindness. "Thank you, sweetheart." Lily shrugged, smiling brighter. "You cook for me constantly. Only fair I return the favor occasionally." After breakfast, Lily left to meet friends. Eleanor remained home, but the silence wasn't oppressive anymore. It felt peaceful. She opened the closet, removed a shoebox containing her bank statements. Balance $71,000. The court had ordered Nathan to pay $52,000 restitution. He'd sold the apartment purchased with her money, losing significantly by selling hastily. Still, payment arrived in full, all documented. Her monthly pension returned to $3,240, completely under her control. With room rent and new savings, she finally had genuine security. Eleanor replaced the papers and walked to the living room. The house looked different now. She had repaired several things, not everything, since she still needed to save. She painted the walls light, almost white, making spaces feel open. Bought a new sofa, not the turquoise dream, but soft beige that felt like a gentle embrace whenever she sat. She replaced curtains, planted flower pots on the porch, installed a new bedroom fan. Each small change constituted a quiet declaration: "This house belongs to me. This life belongs to me." At precisely 10 hours, the gate bell rang. Sophia arriving to collect Eleanor for their Wednesday women's group. Eleanor donned her new floral blouse, purchased with her own money, and felt weightless. En route, Sophia asked as always, "Doing all right?" "I'm wonderful." Eleanor smiled. This time she meant it. They met in a small church hall, 12 women all over 60 each, carrying her own story. Some widowed, some abandoned, some like Eleanor betrayed by their own children. They shared, laughed, cried, cooked, finding hope in one another. Today Eleanor would speak. The coordinator, Mrs. Collins, with silver hair and kind eyes, invited her to the circle's center. "Eleanor, would you share your story with everyone?" Eleanor inhaled deeply and began. She spoke about Nathan, about control, about fear, but also about Thomas's letter, about justice, about new beginnings. When she finished, many women had tears streaming not from pity, but because they recognized themselves in her narrative. A woman named Grace, 72, raised her hand, trembling slightly. "My son manages all my money, claims it's to help me, but I'm too frightened to resist." Eleanor looked directly at her and spoke clearly. "You must resist before it's too late. No one will rescue you. Only you can save yourself." Grace nodded, tears flowing, but her eyes gleamed with something new resolve. After the meeting, Sophia took Eleanor to their favorite restaurant, a cozy place serving home-style food. They ordered cheesy grilled beef, white rice, baked beans, and fries, eating and conversing like old times. "You look different," Sophia observed. "Different how? Lighter, more yourself." Eleanor laughed softly. "Because I am myself again." That evening, returning home, Eleanor discovered a large box wrapped in brown paper tied with red ribbon on her porch, bearing a card. "Thank you, Mrs. Eleanor, for giving me a home when no one else believed in me. You are the mother I always wished for. Love, Lily." Eleanor's hands trembled, opening the box. Inside lay a sea-green knitted blanket, handmade in her favorite color. She settled into her rocking chair, wrapped it around her shoulders, and cried not from sadness, but from gratitude belonging love. That moment taught her the most crucial truth. Family isn't blood. Family comprises people who stay, who care, who choose to walk beside you. That night, rocking on the porch beneath the starry sky, Eleanor reflected on everything about Nathan, about Thomas, about the fragile woman she once was, and the person she had become. She realized you must fall to learn, rising lose to understand what's truly valuable, and hit bottom to discover your remaining strength. Nathan never reached out again after Eleanor blocked his number. Neighbors reported he rented a small apartment and secured steady employment. Whether true or not mattered little now. He was no longer her responsibility. She had fulfilled her maternal duty, raised him, loved him, protected him. He chose another path. That choice belonged to him, as did its consequences. Eleanor looked skyward and whispered, "Thank you, Thomas, for believing I possessed sufficient strength. You were right." Then softly to herself, "Thank you, Eleanor, for not surrendering." Because true wealth isn't what we own, but what we refuse allowing others to take from us. And most precious of all is our self-respect. Some wounds never heal as expected, but time and courage transform them into scars no longer painful, merely reminders of our survival strength. Eleanor once believed a mother's love represented an unbreakable bond. Now she understood love requires nurturing through respect and honesty. When someone only takes without giving, that's not love, but burden. It took nearly a lifetime to learn one simple truth: loving your child doesn't mean losing yourself. Only by preserving dignity and self-respect can you truly give authentic love. Family ultimately isn't where you endure, but where you belong, where you find peace, where you receive love. 2 months after Nathan's departure, Eleanor received a letter. The envelope bore no return address, but she recognized the handwriting immediately. Her heart pounded as she carried it to the porch swing. Should she open it? What poisonous words might it contain? She considered tossing it unopened into the trash, but curiosity prevailed. She deserved to read whatever Nathan had written, even if only to confirm her decision to remove him from her life. Inside was a single page, the writing surprisingly neat. "Mom, I'm writing not to ask forgiveness or money, but to tell you I've started therapy. The therapist says I might have something called narcissistic personality disorder. I don't fully understand it yet, but for the first time I'm trying to see how my actions affected others, especially you. I'm not asking to come back or for another chance. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to understand why I became what I became." Nathan. No apology, no explicit acknowledgement of harm done yet. Something about those words seemed different from his usual manipulations. Eleanor folded the letter and returned it to the envelope. She wouldn't respond, wouldn't reopen that door. But something inside her eased slightly. Not forgiveness exactly, that would require genuine remorse, restitution, and profound change, but perhaps a tiny release of the bitterness she carried. Whether Nathan truly changed or not wasn't her concern anymore. Her healing didn't depend on his redemption. Eleanor tucked the letter into her bedside drawer and continued rebuilding her life. There would always be a Nathan-shaped scar on her heart, but scars eventually stop hurting. They become merely part of your story, not your whole identity. As autumn progressed into winter, Eleanor's home transformed into a haven not just for herself, but others. Her Wednesday women's group occasionally met there, now 12 women filling her living room with laughter, tears, and strength. They shared recipes, swap-shopped clothing, exchanged books, created a micro-community of support and understanding. Grace, the woman who had tearfully described her financial control situation, now sat straighter, spoke louder. With the group's encouragement and Eleanor's guidance, she had visited attorney Richard, revoked her son's access to her accounts, and installed new locks on her doors. "He threatened me," she told the group one Wednesday. "Called me ungrateful, said I'd die alone. I told him I'd rather die alone than live imprisoned." The women applauded Eleanor loudest of all. Watching Grace's transformation reminded her how courage spreads like wildfire when properly kindled. One woman standing up creates space for others to rise. Lily brought youthful energy to counterbalance the wisdom of these older women. She sometimes joined their meetings, listening intently to their stories, offering perspectives from her nursing studies about elder abuse and financial exploitation. She created an informational pamphlet they distributed at senior centers, recognizing financial abuse, know your rights. Eleanor's relationship with Lily deepened beyond landlord and tenant. They established routines: Sunday morning pancakes, Friday evening movies, daily check-ins when their schedules aligned. Not quite mother-daughter, something uniquely their own. Eleanor helped Lily with tough nursing assignments. Lily taught Eleanor to use a smartphone properly. They built bridges across the generation gap, each enriched by the other's perspective. One crisp October evening, Eleanor received another unexpected letter, this one from the Dallas Community College. She opened it puzzled since she had no connection to the school. Inside was an invitation to speak at a symposium on elder financial abuse. The program coordinator had heard about Eleanor through Lily's pamphlet work and wanted her to share her experience with social work students. The very thought terrified Eleanor. Public speaking, revealing her private pain to strangers, exposing her vulnerability and mistakes. She nearly called to decline immediately. But something stopped her, perhaps Thomas's voice echoing in memory. "You've always been stronger than you think." She mentioned the invitation at the next women's group meeting, expecting supportive dismissal of such a frightening proposal. Instead, they erupted in enthusiastic encouragement. "You absolutely must do this," Sophia insisted. "Your story could help countless others." "But what would I say? How would I begin? I've never spoken to an audience." "You speak to us every Wednesday," Grace reminded her. "Just tell your truth exactly as you've told it here." "We'll help you prepare," another woman offered. "We'll be your practice audience." "And I'll come with you," Sophia added. "Sit right in front where you can see me." Eleanor wavered between terror and something unexpected excitement. The idea of transforming her pain into prevention, her trauma into teaching, appealed to her deeply. Perhaps this represented the next step in her healing, reaching beyond her own recovery to help others avoid similar fates. "All right," she finally agreed. "I'll do it." The women spent 3 weeks helping Eleanor craft her presentation. They suggested which details would resonate most strongly, which moments highlighted red flags others should recognize. They helped her create a simple PowerPoint with key warning signs rehearsed with her until her voice grew steady when describing even the most painful parts. When the symposium day arrived, Eleanor dressed in a new outfit purchased specifically for the occasion, a tailored navy pantsuit that made her stand straighter, matching low heels that clicked confidently across floors. Sophia drove her to the college. Lily met them there, both beaming with pride, as if Eleanor were receiving an award rather than preparing to expose her deepest wounds. Backstage, Eleanor's hands trembled so violently she could barely hold her note cards. The auditorium held over 200 students and faculty. What had she been thinking? She couldn't possibly do this. She turned to flee, but Sophia blocked her path. "Remember when you stood up to Nathan, when you emptied that refrigerator and waited on the porch? This is easier than that. These people are here to learn from you, not hurt you." Eleanor took a deep breath. Yes, she had faced worse, much worse than an audience of sympathetic listeners. When her name was announced, she walked onto the stage with the same quiet determination that had enabled her to reclaim her life. "My name is Eleanor," she began, her voice initially soft but gaining strength with each word. "7 months ago, I sat in my rocking chair as my son screamed because I'd finally stood up to his financial exploitation. I'm here to tell you how we reached that moment, what warning signs I missed, and how other seniors might protect themselves from similar situations, even when the threat comes from those they love most." For 40 minutes, she spoke without faltering. She described the gradual erosion of her independence, the subtle manipulation tactics Nathan employed, the shame that kept her silent. She explained how isolation serves as both tool and consequence of elder abuse, how financial control quickly becomes comprehensive control. She detailed the steps she took to escape the legal resources documentation method, safety planning. When she finished, the audience stood applauding. During the question period, student after student approached the microphone, not just with academic inquiries, but with personal stories. Grandparents experiencing similar situations, fears for aging parents, even one tearful admission from a young man who recognized controlling behaviors in his own interactions with his mother. "How do we reach people who are already isolated?" one social work professor asked. "If the abuser controls access, how can we help?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. Community vigilance, the observant neighbor, the persistent friend, the bank teller who notices unusual transactions, the doctor who sees unexplained weight loss. "My friend Sophia saved me by refusing to believe I was just on a diet." We need systems where multiple small concerns can combine into meaningful intervention. Afterward, a line formed of people wanting to speak with her personally. Several older women whispered their own ongoing situations, asking for Attorney Richard's contact information. 2 nursing home administrators requested copies of Lily's pamphlet for their staff training programs. A local newspaper reporter asked for an interview. Eleanor returned home exhausted but experiencing a new sensation purpose. By evening's end, she had agreed to join a county task force on elder abuse prevention record, a training video for bank employees, and speak at 3 more community events. As she prepared for bed that night, Eleanor caught her reflection in the mirror and paused. The woman looking back wasn't the fated ghost who had signed away her freedom at Nathan's insistence. This woman stood straight eyes clear and direct mouth set with determination. This woman had found her voice and discovered it carried power. "There you are," she whispered to her reflection. "Welcome back." Spring arrived, bringing renewal beyond nature's rebirth. Eleanor's calendar filled with speaking engagements and advocacy meetings. The women's group expanded, requiring a move to the community center to accommodate 30 members rather than 12. Lily passed her nursing boards with honors, crediting Eleanor's steady support. The house received fresh paint outside flower beds along the walkway, a small vegetable garden out back. Financial security solidified, too. Attorney Richard helped Eleanor establish a protective trust for her remaining assets, ensuring no one could ever again access her funds without multiple verifications. She learned to manage her own investments, taking a community college course in financial literacy for seniors. She even established a small scholarship at the nursing school for students like Lily, those with talent and determination but limited family support. On the anniversary of Thomas's death, Eleanor visited his grave for the first time since the funeral. She brought white roses, his favorite, and sat on the small bench beside the headstone. "You were right about so many things, Thomas," she told him quietly. "About Nathan, about my strength, about what matters most. I wish we could have discussed these things while you were here. I wish we'd been better partners to each other." She traced his name carved in marble. "I've been angry with you for controlling our finances all those years. Now I understand you were protecting me the only way you knew how. Not the right way, perhaps I needed to learn independence, not be sheltered from responsibility. But your heart was in the right place." She placed the roses carefully against the stone. "I've forgiven you, Thomas. I hope wherever you are, you've forgiven me too for not seeing Nathan clearly, for resenting your strictness without understanding its source. We both did our best with the wisdom we had at the time." Eleanor didn't cry. She felt a peaceful resolution, a closing of one chapter that enabled the next to begin properly. Thomas would always remain part of her story, but no longer defined her present or future. She had found her own path. Walking back to her car, Eleanor spotted an elderly man struggling to carry flowers and a portable vase to a nearby grave. Without hesitation, she approached. "May I help you with those?" His grateful smile revealed the same mixture of grief and determination she recognized in herself. They walked together to his wife's grave, Eleanor holding the flowers while he arranged the vase. 57 years together, he explained, placing each stem carefully. "Never thought I'd have to learn to live alone at 82. "I understand," Eleanor replied. "It's hard rebuilding." "Do you visit someone here regularly?" "My husband, but not regularly, just today to make peace with some old matters." He nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Making peace is important work. May I ask your name?" "Eleanor." "Harold, would you perhaps consider having coffee someday, Eleanor? Not romantic nonsense at our age, just conversation with someone who understands loss." 20 years ago, even 1 year ago, Eleanor would have refused, automatically retreating behind widowhood's protective walls. Now she considered the invitation thoughtfully, not as replacement for Thomas or remedy for loneliness, but as simple human connection, a new friendship offered and accepted on equal terms. "I'd like that, Harold. There's a good cafe near the community center on Maple Street." They exchanged phone numbers, arrangement made for the following week. As Eleanor drove home, she realized how profoundly her boundaries had changed. Not lowered or abandoned, but thoughtfully reconstructed. She now possessed the discernment to recognize genuine connection versus exploitation, the confidence to welcome new people without surrendering autonomy. When Eleanor arrived home, she found Lily sitting on the porch swing, medical textbook open, but ignored as she stared thoughtfully across the street. Eleanor settled beside her. "Something on your mind?" "I've been offered a position at Dallas Memorial after graduation," Lily explained. "Full-time excellent benefits loan forgiveness program. Everything I wanted." "That's wonderful news." "It is, but..." Lily hesitated. The apartment they recommend for staff is available June 1st. My lease with you isn't up until September. Oh. Eleanor felt dual emotions collide: genuine happiness for Lily's success tangled with premature grief over losing her daily presence. Don't worry about the lease. Your career comes first. Actually, I was wondering. Lily closed her textbook fingers, nervously tracing its cover. Would you consider a different arrangement? I could keep renting the room, but convert the monthly payment to helping with house maintenance, driving you to appointments, things like that. The hospital's only 20 minutes away, and I've grown to love living here. Eleanor hadn't anticipated this possibility, that Lily might choose to stay not from necessity, but preference. That the connection they'd built might matter to her as much as it did to Eleanor. You'd want to stay even with hospital housing available. This isn't just housing to me anymore, Lily admitted. It's home. Your family, Mrs. Eleanor. The good kind. Family. The good kind. 4 simple words that healed wounds Eleanor hadn't realized still ached. Tears welled unexpectedly, and she squeezed Lily's hand. I'd like that arrangement very much. They sat together as twilight descended, discussing practical details of their new agreement, but Eleanor's mind kept returning to that word family. She had lost her blood family, Thomas to death, Nathan to his own destructive nature. Yet somehow improbably, she had built something new and precious from those ruins. Family created through choice rather than obligation, strengthened by respect rather than expectation. That night, Eleanor added a final entry to the journal she'd been keeping since Nathan's departure. Today, I realized my life hasn't simply returned to what it was before. It has become something entirely new and unexpectedly beautiful. The painful dismantling of everything familiar forced me to rebuild, not according to others' blueprints, but my own design. Each loss created space for discovery. Each ending permitted new beginnings. Nathan took what I thought I couldn't survive: losing financial security, family connection, dignity. Yet here I stand, not just surviving, but thriving. Not just independent, but interdependent in healthy ways. Not just free from abuse, but actively helping others find similar freedom. I once believed that at 67, life's significant chapters had concluded, that all remaining pages would contain merely footnotes and appendices to what had already occurred. How profoundly mistaken I was. This past year has taught me that courage doesn't expire with youth, growth doesn't cease with age, and it's never too late to become the author of your own story. I don't know how many years remain in my life, but however many or few, they belong completely to me now. And that makes all the difference. Eleanor closed the journal and placed it in her bedside drawer. Through her window, stars punctuated the velvet sky, the same stars she'd gazed upon that night in the rocking chair, listening to Nathan's scream of outrage, feeling the first stirrings of reclaimed power. From that moment to this one, what a journey it had been. Not a straight line from victimhood to victory, but a winding path of small, brave steps, occasional backsliding, unexpected allies, and hard-won wisdom. The path continued beyond today, toward horizons she couldn't yet envision, but no longer feared. Tomorrow would bring coffee with Harold, a women's group meeting, plans for Lily's graduation celebration, another speaking engagement at the community center. A life full of meaningful connections, purpose, and hard-earned serenity. Eleanor turned from the window and prepared for bed, moving with the quiet confidence of a woman who had faced her deepest fears and discovered they held no power over her anymore. The house settled around her with comfortable creaks and sighs, not a prison now, but a sanctuary. Not a place to hide, but a foundation from which to engage with the world on her own terms. As she drifted towards sleep, Eleanor remembered something her mother used to say: "You never know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have." She had discovered her strength through necessity, but now carried it by choice, a quiet, unshakable certainty that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, she possessed everything required to face them. The story that began with a scream in the night now continued with a woman fully awake, fully alive, writing each new day with her own steady hand. Not a corner to die in, but a world to live in on her terms, with her dignity intact, surrounded by the family she had chosen, and who had chosen her in return. And that, after all, is what freedom truly means.